Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pastoral Thoughts Podcast. This is your host, Jack Young, and back in studio today, we have Dr. Tom Stiles. So thank you for being with us, Brother Stiles.
Good to be here. I always enjoy coming and visiting with you.
Yes, we just got done with our Silver Saints luncheon. Had a lovely time.
Mexican fiesta today. It was good.
I think today is Cinco de Mayo, isn't it? Or
No, that's
the last week? Or
the 5th of May.
Oh, wait, way back in the
Cinco.
5th.
Cinco is 5 in Spanish.
Ah, okay. I'll have
And
to
it,
remember
and it
that.
celebrates a victory, Mexican victory over French forces, the Battle of Pueblo. So it's not Independence Day. A lot of people think it's Independence Day, but it's not.
Okay. I was in a Mexican restaurant one time, and there was a fellow waiting on us, and it was Cinco de Mayo that day that we were in there. And I thought, what is Cinco de Mayo? The guy said, I don't know. I'm from Brazil. So, anyway, but now I know.
I took a missionary once that had spent a whole career in Hong Kong to a Chinese restaurant, and the Chinese waiter came up, and so my friend rattled off to him something in Cantonese, and the guy looked at him bewildered, and so then he rattled it off in Mandarin, and the guy says, I'm sorry, but I don't speak Chinese. And the guy said, missionary said, well, where were you from? Cleveland. So talk about humbling, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
feeling
funny.
foolish.
That's funny. Well, what are we talking about today?
Well, I thought we'd talk about what's going on in the country and what's going on in the state of New York. A lot of things happening in Albany this week. Governor Hochul on Monday announced that they have an agreement on the state budget. It's the highest budget in New York State history, $254 billion. It includes a number of things that are giveaways, a $400 rebate for middle-class families, raising the child credit for families. She's also giving free lunch and breakfast for all kids in public schools, whether they need it or not.
100% of kids.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, I don't know about you. When I was a kid, I took a sack lunch. So,
Oh, I did too.
Yeah, most of the time. But it's a lot of giveaways, a lot of things happening, and
Very generous.
Part of what's going on is the governor wants to be reelected in 2 years, so she's working on her campaign. Now,
so generally in the state of New York, to get reelected, you're going to have to have fairly liberal policies and be very generous with the taxpayers' money.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're a very liberal state. The other thing that's going on, though, is the legislature is 2-1 Democrats to Republicans. That means the leader of each house is a Democrat. They're the ones that decide what's voted on. It also means that the committees are 2-1 Democrats to Republicans. So the odds are stacked. Now, part of what happened, and after the governor made her announcement on Monday that we have an agreement, which is normally the three leaders getting behind closed doors and finally thrash it out. And this has been this way for 20 years or more. Different leaders, but the same thing. Mm-hmm. Two of the leaders said, whoa, wait a minute. We're not quite right there yet. So it'll be interesting to see. They didn't vote on any bills this last week on the budget. It's thought that they will start next week, but there's several things that are outstanding. One of the things that held things up is the budget was due April the 1st, but the governor throws in a whole bunch of policy decisions. Those are things that really should be dealt as separate legislative issues, but they might not pass if they were just in a bill. So what they do is she and her predecessor did the same thing, would throw in policy decisions. So she put in a bunch of things, extending discovery laws, tightening that up a little bit, several different cell phone ban on cell phones. That's a new thing in public school from bell to bell.
Okay.
So kids will have to turn in their cell phone when they come in the morning and then pick it up when they leave in the afternoon.
I would actually agree with that one.
I think that one's not a bad idea. I think we really need to do some thought about what cell phones and social media are doing to our kids. Mm-hmm.
And our adults. Even
the whole internet thing and games and things like that nature. Kids are not outside playing like they were when we were kids. I know your kids play outside because you talk about it once in a while. Mm-hmm. But a lot of kids are stuck in front of a screen all the time, and
6 to 8 hours a day of screen time.
And then it's having an impact. We're finding out it has an impact psychologically. Mm-hmm. It's having an impact on them as far as communication. Kids a lot of times don't talk to each other; they text. It's kind of a strange thing. You can go to a restaurant and see two kids having lunch together, and they're texting rather than talking.
Yeah, the school that my daughter goes to, they haven't had a new policy. I think it was implemented last year that even on lunch break, the kids couldn't have their cell phones, because what they noticed even at lunch is that every child, they weren't talking at the lunch table. Unfortunately, the dinner table at home might be the same way, but so they weren't talking to each other. But now that they have to check in their cell phones in the morning and get them at the end of the day, they're all having break and talking to each other face to face.
I didn't face when I was raising my kids. Now, we had some rules on the phone, limiting the amount of time kids could spend on the phone. And as a pastor, I had to guard my time, so I asked people not to call me between 5 and 6:30 each night, because that was our supper time. That was the time we're going to have devotions, unless it was an emergency, of course. But people respected that, and the kids were not allowed to take calls or receive calls. And then at night, if a boy was calling one of my girls, I want to know who that is and what he wants.
Right. If you want to listen in, you just hold on to the other line. And then if you didn't want to get the phone, there was no voicemail.
No.
That came later, like I would say 90s maybe.
See, I go back way before that. I can remember having an 8-party line in the farmhouse.
Simpler times.
Where we had 8 different families, and one lady in particular was always listening. You could always say, Mrs. Owens, would you please hang up? And you'd hear a click. I don't know if she hung up or not, but different time. Our phone was 1 ring and a half, because the phones would ring in different numbers for different people. And so, now kids, I've got a cell phone. In fact, the first computers we had were only a fraction of what our cell phones are today.
Well, my mother talks about when the calculator came out at college, they were, I think, $99 for a basic calculator, and that was that was high tech.
You can buy a good calculator now for $10.
Yes, a very nice one. Very nice one.
And the other thing that's happening, though, we're depending more and more on machines, and as a result, people can't do basic math.
Absolutely,
it's interesting. I'm on the New York State Education Commissioner's Advisory Council for Religious Independent Schools, and they're talking about some of the technology and things as well. And people are beginning to be concerned that maybe we need to get back to basics, teaching basic math. Maybe we need to start talking about phonics so kids can read. Because I talked this morning I had breakfast with a couple of friends, and one of the guys said they had been trying to hire some people, technicians, and they have a math test. And the problem is 90% of the applicants can't pass the math test, and it's simple math.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Because they've used computer or calculators all their life.
Yeah, they've never
had to do 2 plus 2. Or
we would have to go through the charts.
Simple math, simple math.
All the multiplication tables. Yeah. All the flashcards. Remember flashcards?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you had to learn all of those different things.
Barb, as you know, was a teacher for 39 years, and Barb pounded those math facts into kids. So it was always impressive. We'd have parental night. We'd have our parents come in a program and have the kids play some of the games, and they were just as fast as can be on math facts, and that'll last them all their life. That's an important thing to.
It's so very helpful. I am very thankful that I learned how to add, subtract, multiply. So at least. One positive note in the state: no cell phones. Yeah, during school time. And then one of the negative things in the budget is added to their end of life. What do they call it?
Yes, physician-assisted suicide.
Is that what they're calling it?
No, I think they've got different names.
Got a fancier word for it.
Yeah, but it's basically allowing a doctor to prescribe a lethal dosage to people that want to kill themselves. And it's, right now there's some protection, and it has to be 2 physicians. It has to be, they have to certify the person has a terminal illness or something. But it's a slippery slope. They did this in Holland when it was first introduced years ago. And then it's now involuntary suicide, where physicians are actually, people are afraid to go to hospitals because the doctor may kill them.
They might put them down.
Yeah.
So their quality of life is not.
So, that's the argument. Well, they have a bad quality of life, and so we're trying to play God is what it amounts to, and that's a dangerous thing to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another one that's a concern that's part of the budget is they're extending the involuntary confinement for mental illness. The concern about that is...
They used to have that.
The Soviet Union uses that against Christians.
Yeah.
Did.
They send the paddy wagon or whatever. Yeah. They send... and I believe that at one time in our state and in other states too, that was something that could be done, that you could be held against your will because somebody had turned you in, that you were
dangerous,
not mentally competent. Or
this
capable.
Is right now. I think you have to be a danger to yourself or incapable of providing for your basic needs. But it's still a slippery slope when you start having involuntary. And I worked as a chaplain with the sheriff's department for years, and I helped pick up people that were needed to be put in institutions occasionally. Mm-hmm. We had a woman one time that I got a call and asked if I would help the officer pick up this woman who had to go into the mental hospital. And she was convinced that she was living in pioneer days, and she was shooting at cars thinking the Indians were attacking her.
No kidding.
And so the sheriff's department asked me to go with the officer. So when I went and met the officer, it was a woman, an American Indian.
Oh, no.
It was not pleasant. But we were able to get the woman safely, the help that she needed. Another time I was called, there was a man in a field, and they asked if I would meet the officer and try to talk the person down. And it was the opening day of deer season. The guy's in the middle of the field wearing brown clothes, sitting on the field. And when we went up to him and asked him, what he was doing there, he was eating a mock orange, which is really not edible fruit. And he said, "Well, I'm a visitor from another planet." And I had not bothered getting a coat. It was opening day of deer season. It was cold out there, and we tried to get him in the squad car where you got some confinement plus warmth. He wouldn't move until finally he got up and he looked at me and he says, "I think I'll kill you." And at that point we said, "Bingo, we got you." And it's a threat to others.
Yeah, okay.
So we were able to take him in. So there is real mental illness. There are people that really do flip out and they really do need help. Mm-hmm. But I think we got to be careful when we pass laws to extend who can do it and how long they can hold a person against their will.
Right. So the end-of-life care, or whatever the fancy word is that people have for assisted suicide, that's a slippery slope, because in some countries that it becomes, well, what is their quality of life? And so then you have a doctor deciding what quality of life is. And really that is a moral question. That is not a question that a doctor can answer. And so they could determine that people with Down syndrome don't have a quality of life, good quality of life.
Well, and that's happened in some countries.
Yes.
Already they're aborting babies that are born with Down syndrome because they don't have a good quality of life.
And yes, and I do understand that the majority of Down syndrome babies are aborted before they're ever born. Yeah. And then also with the being incarcerated against your will because somebody had turned you in for being mentally incompetent, that can be a slippery slope as well. Is there anything else morally that you would say that were
those are probably the big ones? Okay. I don't know of anything else. It's very difficult to keep track of the legislature. Mm-hmm. The legislature, they've already introduced, since January, they started with 0 bills. Some are pre-filed, so there's some numbers there, but technically they start in January. They run till June. They finish up about the first week in June now. Sometimes they'll extend that to the second or third week. The last week, last year, they passed something like 800 bills, 600 of which passed in the last couple of weeks. So it's at the very end, everything gets crammed in, and there's some various issues that are coming up. So you never know quite what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. And same with voting. The majority leader decides what's going to be voted on in the calendar. So a bill is introduced, goes through all the committees it needs to go through. It's ready to be passed. It's on the calendar, and first reading, third reading, or whatever. And then the majority leader says, "All right, today we're going to vote on this one and this one, but not this one." And so you never quite know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I know calling on different bills and things, and I used to get return phone calls from a senator or assemblyman saying, just to let you know that bill never made it out of committee. Mm-hmm. And so there's all these bills in committee. And
and this is the first year. So what happens in June, everything stays on hold until next January. Then they pick up right where they left off. But the end of June next year, everything's gone. It's dead. So they have to refile. Everything gets new numbers. Everything changes. So there will be somewhere probably around 20,000 bills introduced in the legislature. We really don't need 20,000 new laws. We really don't. We're over-regulated and overtaxed. And, it's kind of nice the governor says we're going to give you $400 back because of inflation. But the truth of the matter is we're spending so much money, we're digging ourselves a hole. Now, our state constitution says that the budget has to be balanced. So income versus outgo have to be equal. The problem is both of them are estimates. They estimate the amount of money they're going to get, and then they estimate the amount of money they want to spend. And then there's a number of tricks that they pull. One of them is they can have carryovers. So we didn't spend it this year, but we'll carry it over to next year. But then they also want that same amount that was designated the year before. We really have a dysfunctional government. It's really basically right now 3 people deciding what the budget is, then going to the legislature and they rubber stamp it. This year may be different in that the progressives, now they're the more liberals.
Right.
They're not happy. They wanted to spend a lot more money. In fact, both Democrats in the legislature and in the Senate wanted to spend more. The budget is $2 billion with a B, more than what the governor proposed. Mm-hmm. So you see how this thing's growing. You
said a 6% increase over last year.
Yeah. And then there's another problem, and that is the state may lose money from the federal government. It's very possible that there will be cuts from the federal government. If that happens, those monies have to be made up somehow.
So New York State, you were saying, gets $80 billion.
I think it's 93 billion
for Medicaid,
and about half of that I think is Medicaid.
Because we've been seeing commercials on TV about cutting Medicaid, like against cutting Medicaid, obviously.
Yeah, and I really don't believe the media or the left when they say that.
I don't either.
President Trump and his staff have said we're not cutting Medicaid. We're not touching Social Security.
They're not going to cut entitlements.
Now, what they will do is they're trying to find waste, and there is a lot of waste. We know Medicaid's got all kinds of waste, and the waste every once in a while. We do have an auditor, a comptroller, and occasionally they will come out with some doctor that's been overcharging, and there's all kinds of fraud that goes on. People that deny, we're finding on Social Security, for instance, people have been dead for a long time still collecting.
Sure.
But I think that's what they're cut. I don't think they'll cut anything else. And it's kind of the third rail. Third rail on trains is the electric. That's where the charge is. You don't touch the third rail. So in politics, you don't touch the third rail. You don't touch that because if you do, you're not going to be reelected.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they try to scare people to thinking, I'm going to lose my Social Security.
Well, every time I see one of those commercials, I think that's exactly what it is. It's just a scare tactic. They're not going to take away your Medicaid. Get out of here. So what as New Yorkers, as pastors and people who attend church in the state of New York, what would be the spiritual challenges for us? What actions should we take?
I think the biggest thing, first of all, is to pray. Mm-hmm. We need to pray for those in authority. Yesterday was the National Day of Prayer. We need to be praying not just once a year. We need to be praying all year long for our leaders, so we may lead a quiet and peaceful life, the Bible says in 1 Timothy chapter 2. And that prayer is important. And the other thing I think we need to do is be salt and light. There's times when we should expose the dark, the wickedness. When I was a kid on the farm, I loved to go out in the field and kick over a log and see what crawled out. Mm-hmm. And I think occasionally we need to do that with our government and expose the error, expose things that are wrong. And of course, one of the things you can do is vote. Mm-hmm. We vote for these people. Mm-hmm. And if we're not happy, then, there's no reason for that. We need to vote. And we are seeing influence. There are things happening, particularly in the federal government, not so much in New York. We didn't see the move. I think one of the things we do, for instance, is Right now, schools are not supposed to allow boys who think they're girls to play in girls' sports. And yet schools are doing that all across New York State. Mm-hmm. We have schools that have a policy that a boy can use whichever bathroom he identifies with, his gender. And that's really foolishness. So part of it is the truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So we as Christians, and particularly as pastors, proclaim the truth of God's word. And when we can explain God's word, I think error can never survive.
Yeah. Yeah, so prayer, going forward with the gospel, getting it involved, being a good citizen, voting, getting involved in the process. Yeah. If Christians could run for school boards, they could go to the school board meetings, get involved in their local politics and see where the Lord takes them from there.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we need to remember is our first mission is, of course, to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. All too often, the religious right is confused on the gospel. It's
not a top-down, moral. Yeah.
Often you'll find that there's Catholics that really have a different gospel, salvation of works and by worshiping Mary and all of those kind of things. You'll find Mormons involved in a lot of religious right kind of things. And we need to remember these are people that need Christ. We need to love them and share the gospel with them. And the same is true for the left. I worked for a number of years with Dwayne Motley and New Yorkers for Constitutional Freedom, as you know. And Dwayne was always a very faithful witness. There was one leading homosexual legislator, state senator, and Dwayne presented the gospel to him several times. He announced his retirement. This guy announced his retirement, and Dwayne went to see him. He said, "Now, before you leave the Senate, I want to explain this one more time." And he went through the plan of salvation. And this homosexual senator said, I don't agree with you. I'm not going to believe, but I do believe you care for me.
Amen.
And I think that's the attitude we need to have.
Yeah, that means you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Amen. Amen. All right. You want to talk about the first 100 days?
Yeah, I thought we might.
All right.
It's been very hard to keep up with Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. He has given well over 100 executive actions or commands. He's done all kinds of things. He celebrated his 100th day in office, and that's been kind of a thing, I think, since John Kennedy. People talk about the first 100 days. So he hit the road running, to say the least. He had 4 years off, and I think he did a lot of thinking about it. Mm-hmm. He's assembled his cabinet. His cabinet, I think, is very strong for the most part. Mm-hmm. There's some guys that we would disagree with. The media doesn't get him. Yesterday's headline was Walsh is out as the head of Homeland Security, or whatever his office was with Assistant of Homeland Security.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then later in the day, Trump announced that he's appointing him to be the ambassador to the UN. So I'm not sure he was fired so much as the headlines are always fired and he's no good and Bob Walsh is no good. And all of a sudden the president's praising him as going to be a great ambassador to the United Nations. And I think the problem people have is, and I have a problem with it, you never know when he's kidding or when he's serious sometimes.
And he obloviates too.
Yeah.
Day one, we're going to bring Putin to the table, and it's been 100 days.
Yeah,
and there's
and I'm going to bring inflation down. Well, some costs are going down. The price of oil's way down. Now, one of the biggest accomplishments was he secured the border. Mm-hmm. Something like 99% less crossing of the border.
Yes.
Last week, I think there was 9. A year ago, there were like 4,000 the same day.
Right.
So it's amazing what that's been. But and again, we ought to pray for the president, have wisdom.
So what? Let me ask you this too. As far as a Christian, of course, we care for all life, not just the life of Americans. We care for all souls, not just American souls. So, and I'm sure that you've probably written on this maybe multiple times. But as a Christian, how would you explain caring for the poor, caring for the stranger? It says in the Old Testament where we are how would you explain your position on immigration?
We're not anti-immigrants. We're all, as Americans, even if you're an American Indian, ancestors came from someplace else. There are no Native Americans as such. Indians came maybe before the Europeans, but they came from somewhere else. And then we romanticize a lot of our history. Indians were warlike people. They fought wars with one another. They stole one another's territories, and so that part aside, the Bible does talk about the stranger. But the stranger that came to Israel, that's the foreigner that moved to Israel, had to adopt Israel's ways. They had to adopt their God. Now, it was a theocracy, so it's a little different than what we are. Mm-hmm. But they had to fit in. America is designed to be a melting pot. And we're a rich country in part because of our diversity, but it's our unity that makes us a great nation.
Right. We have the same ideal.
Yeah. An orchestra, for instance, where everybody's doing his own thing is chaos. Mm-hmm. But if they are on the same page of music, they can make beautiful music together. So when people come here, they should be coming here to adopt an American way of life.
Through the legal
That's
process.
not always true.
Right.
And I believe they should come legally. We have to control our borders. If we don't control our borders, we'll eventually not have a country.
Right.
You can't allow large numbers of Muslims to come in that want to change this country to make it an Islamic republic. Mm-hmm. You can't have Chinese people coming in. There were 40,000 a year ago that came in, Chinese nationals. China does not have an open door policy. You can't just move out.
No.
So they were coming, and they're well funded, well equipped. What are they doing here? I think Trump is right in getting rid of the worst first. Now, the total immigration problem is a massive problem. It's estimated there's like 30 million immigrants, illegal immigrants living in the United States. Population is only 330 million, so we're almost at 10%.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you're not going to allow those people to work, if you don't know who they are, you don't know why they're here, if they have criminal records and all those kind of things, you've got a massive problem. Mm-hmm. The other part of the problem, and the reason it's complex, is what do you do with the children who were brought here? They're not children now. They may have been brought 30 years ago, and this wasn't just Biden's problem. This has gone on for a long time. Mm-hmm. Ronald Reagan announced we had solved the immigration problem.
Amnesty.
Yeah. And, we've solved it. No, we didn't. So there needs to be long-term. And I don't really hear either Republicans or Democrats proposing a policy. We hear about dreamers, for instance. You're going to allow them, those are people who came as children, you're going to allow them to stay. They may not speak the language of the country where their parents originated. So it's a massive problem. Now, the other side of that is the world is coming to us. So it's a wonderful opportunity for the churches to reach people that need help. International student ministries, for instance, is on our campuses. They're working with students. Now, those are students that are here legally. They're studying here in America, but they're offering help to them, help in finding friends and having Bible studies and doing other kinds of things. There are churches that are reaching out, starting ministries to immigrants. Jose Rodriguez,
I was thinking of him
in town, and Craig Jones at Bible Baptist Temple here in Rochester. They have a big influx of people. John and Eric Odachuk, they're from Ukraine. They're starting a church. They have been, it's 5 years old now, so I guess it's not starting anymore. Mm-hmm. But they need a building, by the way, so it's a prayer request. But they're reaching, Ukrainians that are coming to this country that need to get established, and they're sponsoring people. They're helping out. Now, they're not helping the illegals. They're doing this legally, but they have an influx of people that are coming. And these are people that want a better life. These are good people. Mm-hmm. They're not criminals.
They're family people.
Now, when you're talking about gangs, and they're talking about the numbers of gangs, it's incredible. During the first 100 days, Donald Trump's people have deported 150,000 people. But that's less than 1%.
Oh, yeah, it's a fraction of a fraction.
Yeah, and there's some high-profile cases that are being challenged. Now, Trump is being challenged in court on everything he does.
Right.
So something like, last time I counted, about 175 cases against him right now active. Garcia, for instance, the immigrant that was sent to El Salvador. There's no question he was a gang member. They just released a tape yesterday showing that he was trafficking people. This is not a nice person. He's being portrayed as a Maryland father, and
right.
His wife had 3 cases at times when she went to court asking for protection from this guy, saying he was dangerous and she was afraid of him. Now she's singing a different tune, but we really need to be looking at these people, because what happened is they were letting people come in and saying, all right, we'll give you a court date. And some of these court dates are 2035. Now, due process is what we're hearing from the other side. Oh, I got to have due process.
You don't have constitutional rights as an immigrant.
I don't. You're not being accused of a crime other than you're here illegally.
Yeah.
So you have to go home.
Right.
That's a very simple rule.
It's called extradite.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so A+ on immigration. What do you think about the tariffs?
I don't know what to think about the tariffs. Well, part of it is what Trump is trying to do is get balance. Mm-hmm. I'm not a big fan of tariffs per se, but I think he's using it as a bargaining chip. I personally don't think Trump is a conservative. I think he is a businessman with a lot of common sense. And he looks at it and says, we're being ripped off.
Right. This is not a fair deal for
It's not fair. Mm-hmm. So we'll raise a tariff. And what's happened is all these countries, there's 30 countries now trying to negotiate some kind of contract and agreement with the United States. I think that's a reasonable thing. For instance, our farmers can't import to China. There's restrictions of all kinds. There's big tariffs for us to send stuff to Canada even. So it's right to do it. And he's trying to bring American manufacturing back to the United States. What's happening is companies say, hey, we can build a plant in Mexico and have cheap labor,
right,
and then import it over. Well, that's not fair to Mexico. It's not fair to us either. And so I think what he's doing is probably wise. It's going to take some time. People have to recognize you're not going to solve all the problems of the world in 100 days. And the president needs to understand that too.
I think that this time around, it seems like he understands that concept and that fact. I don't think that perhaps he was able to, let's say, quote unquote, accomplish a lot in his first 100 days. But 143 executive orders is a lot of executive orders. Yeah. But as far as
the problem is he's made the executive order and then it's being challenged in court, so we don't know whether we're going to have it or not.
Yeah.
But I do think, particularly on immigration, securing the border has been huge.
Yeah, that's a big.
We've stopped the influx. Mm-hmm. That's a huge thing. If he did nothing more than that, I think that would be a great accomplishment. Yeah. I do think we're gaining respect in the world, personally, and I think Biden was perceived by the world as being a weak leader.
Sure.
And I think the world looks at Trump as, well, we don't know what he's going to do.
Right.
And so there's a fear of respect. And he's,
well, it's better to be respected than liked.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't agree with everything the president's doing. I don't, I think I run into two kinds of reactions to Donald Trump amongst Christians. Some think he's the Messiah.
Right.
He's not.
Yeah.
And some people think he's the Antichrist. And I don't think he's either one.
Right. I would definitely agree. So, do you think that the right, because I remember, for instance, back when George W. Bush was president, it seemed like he polarized religion more so. I just remember out door knocking and things, and people would react like I was
Trump. I don't think we've seen
Republican.
It may have started then, and you could argue with moral majority.
Yeah, Jerry Falwell type thing.
With Ronald Reagan, but I don't think we saw near the hatred to the Republicans or Trump until Trump came along. Trump has really changed the Republican Party. The country club Republicans are not popular right now.
Yeah,
and and the conservatives are not quite sure about some of the tariffs and some of the other things he's doing. I think it's very hard to keep up with Trump and what he's doing. He's always, Do you play chess?
No, I don't.
I
know how to play. It's been a while.
I wouldn't call myself a chess player either, but I had an uncle that was a master chess player, and he was always several moves ahead of me. That was the secret to his success. And while he was a master, he could tell what you were thinking. And I think that's Donald Trump.
Yeah.
On the world stage, I think he's several steps ahead of us, and it's hard to keep up exactly with what he's got in mind, what the goal is.
How about Doge, Elon Musk, 160 billion cut from the federal budget, which I don't know what percentage that is, fraction.
It's a fraction, but we really needed that kind of thing. Basically, Doge is just an auditor. Mm-hmm. What they're doing, he's got businessmen and young geniuses that are working with him. They're going into these various agencies. He gave an interesting press conference last night or the night before, in which he had his group together, and they let Jesse Waters interview them and talk with him. And part of what they said was they're finding in many of these agencies people that are sincere missionaries, is what they call them, not mercenaries.
Okay.
Mercenaries are just there for the job and collecting and ripping off. They found large amounts of waste in our government, and I think that needed to be cleaned up. But they're also finding people that really sincerely want to be servants, want to serve, mm-hmm. and do what's right.
They feel like it's a calling, and they have
feel,
a good work,
and they feel like they're being released to do the job.
Yeah.
So some of the foolishness, and there's, there every once in a while, you look and you hear some of the things that are being found out. We're paying for all kinds of stuff that we shouldn't be paying for.
Right.
It's just absurd. We could use that in New York.
Mm-hmm. Doge. Go through our books in New York.
During the COVID crisis, there was some medical equipment. I just read this last week, 253 machines at a cost of, I think it was $1 million a piece or something. And only 3 of those have actually been distributed. The rest are sitting in a warehouse somewhere. Well, that's, we don't have money to burn like that.
No. And you think about, the poor taxpayer.
It was paying for it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, enough was needed, and why are they in warehouses? Don't hospitals need those anymore? That equipment, is it obsolete? What's the story? This press release I saw didn't tell what the story was or what they were used for. But when you see that kind of thing, you say, we need somebody to be looking at it. Now, Musk said he would be temporary. He's a temporary employee. He has to be out, and he's announced that he's going to step back. And
it only makes sense that he does. I mean, he's got bigger fish to fry.
This guy's a genius. He's into all kinds of space X and Tesla, and he's just incredible. X now it's called, I guess, instead of Twitter. Instead of Twitter, I guess you're sending an X, or I don't know how that works.
I don't know how that works.
But he's doing all these businesses and stuff,
and
he's being hated now. You see absurd things. The left is attacking Tesla cars and dealerships, but who are the people that buy Teslas?
Usually,
the left
Democrats. They're
people in the environment.
It's amazing how things change. I have a person I've known for close to 7. Yes, I would say 7 years this summer. I've been going to the same gym as him, and he drives a Tesla. He had a blue one, and then he had a white one. And he's a professional, works for Wegmans, but a lettered man, left-leaning, and he came with a Volkswagen. He goes, no, it was a Volvo. And I said, hey, what happened to your Tesla? And he said, well, it's crazy how things change. He says, I used to get run off the road by big pickup trucks, with Trumpers in them. He says, but now, I'm afraid of getting my car torched by.
And that's the other thing that's just wrong. It shouldn't be that you get attacked for the kind of car you drive. Mm-mm. I mean, it's just crazy. I was on my way to church a couple of weeks ago, and the Tesla was right in front of me and had a bumper sticker. I bought this when Tesla was still good.
Please. It's amazing. I feel sorry for all those Democrats who it switched on them, and I've seen these positions switch in my lifetime. So many, it's funny. How about the Department of Education? We're doing away with the Department of Education.
And we should. Department of Education was established by Jimmy Carter as a reward to the teachers union for supporting him for president. So basically, I told you I'm on the advisory council for religious independent schools for the State Department of Education. And a lot of those meetings are about various programs, federal programs, and how we get money and how we get more money. Our schools do not accept federal funds, but most of the schools around us that are represented down the table, they get all kinds of funds. And there's all kind. I've asked several times, could you please give me a dictionary on some of these programs, because they have all kinds of names, and they use the initials. So what is that?
Right.
And a lot of it is very complicated, and the state aid can't answer the question because they have to go to the federal, and federal takes time to get an answer back to them. And so I think really, and I don't think it just should be given back to the states. I think education should be given back to the parents.
Yeah.
I think we would change. Part of the state budget this year is we're going to give free lunches and breakfasts to all kids in public school. Now, when they do that, you can bet the next council meeting they're going to be saying, why can't we get free meals? Yeah.
Yeah.
And whether you need it or not,
Well, what about dinner? Shouldn't these kids? You don't want these kids not to have dinner, do you? Obviously that's the next thing.
And part of what's happening is the state is taking over the responsibility of the parents.
Yeah, and of course there's to me it's a left philosophical Marxist agenda to
dismantle
power.
family.
Yes, yeah, that the nuclear family is enemy number one of a leftist agenda. So we gotta,
I've read a lot of books to figure out what a liberal thinks, why he thinks the way he does, and my basic conclusion is liberals think they can do better than you can. They can raise your kids better. They can spend your money better. They can do, they're smarter than you are. More. And so they're the ones that can leave it to the professionals. We will teach your kids. We will raise your kids. And of course, what's happening is it's a mess. Whenever the government intrudes on the family, they mess things up.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Ronald Reagan said, government is not the solution. Government is the problem.
Right.
And all too often that's, it's regulations and all kinds of things.
Well, God made these three different institutions and gave them each realms of authority, and fallen man wants to go outside of his realm of authority and meddle with authority that is not his. So you have the church, you have the home, and you have the state. And, when God is out of the equation, the state wants to take from the family and vice versa.
And that's where the conflict is, and that's where the church-state conflicts are as well. And there's some things that are in between. For instance, if a church buys a bus, they have to pay, get a license.
Right.
You get that from the state. You have to follow the regulations of the law. You can't drive on whatever side of the road you want. Right. So there should be cooperation,
right, between the three,
but not usurping of authority.
It's the same way with the church and the home. Is that I'm a pastor, but I have all these different homes represented inside of our church. I'm not to meddle in authority inside the home. That is not the church's authority. The church has its realm, the home has its realm, and government also has its realm. And these all touch in these little.
And sometimes you see, the home, people elevating the home above the church,
right,
and that's not right either.
Or the church above the state, or the state above the church, or state above the home, and bringing everything back into balance is a constant battle. Evil prevails when good men do nothing, right?
That's the truth.
That's true.
That's the truth.
Can you? Well, I guess we summarize Trump's 100 days. You give Trump a grade letter, or
I'd give him a B+ probably.
Yeah,
I think overall, I don't like all of his rhetoric. I'm somewhat sympathetic to Canadians.
Do you think he's doing better the second term than he did the first?
Yes,
term?
I do.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think part of it is he had 4 years to think about what he would do if he got back, and he's doing it. I think he's pulled together a better cabinet than he had the first time.
Mm-hmm.
He's got people that he can trust that could work with him that are not going to stab him in the back. And I think he's got people that are committed to change. Mm-hmm. For instance, Hedgepeth as defense secretary was an excellent choice. The left hates it, but immediately he did away with the DEI program. Mm-hmm. Recruitments are up, just an enormous percent, because people are taking pride. Mm-hmm. A couple of years ago, I was in a church and talked about gay pride was being celebrated by all 4 branches of the armed forces. Transitional day. We were paying soldiers that wanted to transition to become women. We were paying for that with tax dollars while they're on active duty. That was absurd. Mm-hmm. Well, that's being changed. And when I finished the message, there was a guy in the audience that I didn't know who was a SEAL on leave. And he said, Tom, you don't realize it's worse than you think. He said, all my friends want out.
Oh, yeah.
And I know we've got some guys in the church that are pastors now that were career military people that got out. You know that from your time in Black River, that just said, we can't take it anymore. And now there's a return to pride in the armed forces.
Right.
So we're seeing a lot of things like that are happening. And I think those are good things. Now, the programs on the federal government Department of Education, those will be what's necessary will be just sent to other departments. So there's not.
How about legislation?
Grants and all that.
How come more legislation hasn't been passed?
Well, that's a good question. Republicans are the majority in the Senate and in the House. Mm-hmm. Now, the Senate has a strange rule that they have to have a supermajority, 60 votes to advance legislation. Now, there's some exceptions to that. If they do a budget resolution, for instance, that's an exception. But that blocks a lot of legislation. I would like to see, more written policy. What are we going to do with immigrants? We're just right now sending back people that are here illegally. But what about we mentioned dreamers? Is there a path to citizenship? If people are good, working, are we able to let them work? So we need some concrete legislation. And I don't see that coming right now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a failure. Mm-hmm. Obamacare was a promise in the last term.
Right.
Nothing happened. But I never did see what's going to replace it.
Right.
We never saw legislation introduced. Now, Trump needs to get legislation passed now.
Yes. Yeah, before
2 years. 2 years, he may not have the majority.
Probably not.
And then
historically, that usually have a little bit of a pendulum swing back the other way.
And it's narrow in the House.
Yeah.
220 to 213 with 2 absences right now, I think, is what it is. So they can't afford to lose too many Republicans on any issue. And we do have some rhino Republicans that will lean left. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, this big, beautiful bill that they're working on, I think would be better broke up into smaller pieces to make them smaller, beautiful bills instead of the big, beautiful. But that may come in June, and that'll put in permanent tax relief and some things that need to happen. And Trump says the tariffs are going to help save the taxes, and what DOJ is doing, cutting out wasteful spending. The national debt now is $36 trillion. When Biden took office, it was $21 trillion.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So we're spending $2 trillion right now above what we're taking in.
I remember.
You can't do that.
Yeah, I remember when Bill Clinton was running for office back in 94. Yeah. 90, was it 90? Wait, no, 90.
Yeah.
92. It was 1992. And him in the debate with George H.W. Talking about the $6 trillion debt was unconscionable.
Yep.
It's immoral. And it's unethical.
It was Newt Gingrich, but it was during that did it in the Congress. Yeah. But it was during Bill Clinton's administration that he did not have a deficit.
Yeah.
Remember him standing on the floor of the Congress saying the age of big government is over.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me just to see people losing their minds because DOGE is just cutting a fraction of a percent of wasteful spending, when you've had every president that's ever gotten elected.
They've always promised
to cut wasteful spending.
Yep.
And here's somebody that's actually doing a little bit of it, with a $36 trillion debt, and everyone's complaining about inflation at the same time.
And we're doing all kinds of foolish things.
But yeah, no, I'm very thankful personally for our president. I don't think he's perfect. I don't think he's Jesus or anything like that, but pretty amazing. And I think he, like you said, the last 4 years has been tested.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been put in the furnace of affliction, man. He's just been persecuted on many different levels. He's been shot.
And still standing strong.
Yeah.
I tell people, I think we're experiencing a reprieve on bad policies. Maybe relief might be a good word.
Yeah.
But we really need revival.
Right.
America needs to turn back to God. Mm-hmm. And President Trump speaks well of God. Mm-hmm. I mean, he yesterday in the day of prayer, but part of his speech yesterday sounded more like a campaign speech. What I did, I did this, and we've done this. And
we did this for the faith community, and I put forth whatever. And
so, there needs to be more of a humble spirit. Now, the first cabinet meeting in March, he had Scott Turner pray. And Scott Turner is a Baptist pastor, or was a Baptist pastor. He's the secretary of HUD now. And he prayed, and part of what he said, we want to put God back in his rightful place. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the path to success for Trump or for any president. And for America, if we'll put God back in his rightful place, then I think we'll see prosperity and peace. Mm-hmm. But until we do that, I think we're going to hear wars and rumors of wars, and we're going to have inflation and immigration. We're going to have all these problems continuing.
So we have a little space of grace, and we should get to work propagating the gospel
while we can,
and be praying for revival. Amen. Hey, can you give us any kind of update? I know it's kind of sensitive information, but your daughter and her missionary husband, John.
Well, Wendy and John Patton. Wendy is our oldest daughter. She has two girls. One just celebrated her 13th birthday, and the other celebrated her 12th birthday. It's a miracle kind of story. They were married in 2010. They have been. John grew up. My son-in-law grew up in Peru. On Wendy's birthday, April 6th, at night, they had a man outside the compound off the street singing very loudly, playing very loud music. And my son-in-law went out to talk with him. And when he did, I asked him if he could quiet down. They couldn't sleep, and the guy just laughed at him and made fun. And there was a group of guys partying with him, and they attacked John. Somehow he was hit. He's not even sure how that happened, but somebody punched him in the face. He lost his glasses. He went back to the compound and was able to open the gate with a key. He said he just has to be God was with me, because he said they were right on top of me, and I think if they'd caught me, they'd killed me. They went on social media, which they have down there, and said a gringo had beat up a teenager. That caused a mob to form in front of their compound. They broke through the gate. They tried to break into the house. The police were called. The police came and basically took John and Wendy and the girls to the police station. Wendy and John were separated. The girls were separated with their mother, but they were separated, not knowing what's going on. Wendy said it was very scary, as you could imagine. John was interviewed for some time. They finally decided that they would make him pay for the speaker that their guy claimed John had broke, and that we hadn't done that. And then they were told that it's not safe for you to stay or go back home. So they went to his brother's, and then the next day they flew to Lima, and then they talked with their mission agency, ABWE, and they said, look, it's not safe for you to stay there. We need to have you come home. So they're back in the States. John believes it was gang-related, and it was maybe a setup to send a message to the neighbors to keep quiet about this party going on in the street corners. Probably drugs involved as well. Mm-hmm. It's that kind of place. So it was very disruptive to them. So we appreciate you praying for them. John, my son-in-law, is 60 years old. So what do you do now? If they can't go back to Peru, do they stay in the States? What do they do? And so it's very, and then the girls, one girl holds everything in, and the other girl's having a hard time sleeping at night.
Sure.
Because of what they had experienced. So we're praying for healing and for God to, ABW they have a crisis team. They're working with them. The girls are getting counseling from a crisis management type ministry. Actually, a ministry for people that have gone through this kind of trauma. And so John, they were ready to climb a fence and go to the neighbors because they thought the crowd was going to kill them.
Yeah.
So it was not a
scary situation.
Very scary situation.
Yeah. Well,
so we're not saying where they are.
Yeah. So praise the Lord, they're safe and back in
so
the
we're
States,
thankful. We were able to see them last week.
A lot of prayer.
My wife and I went to see them, and it's a neighboring state, and we were able to go and visit and spend some time with them. So
wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
And so you've written a lot of articles, and you have a newsletter, and people need to go to ariseministries.org, right?
Right. You can subscribe there if you'd like,
or subscribe to the newsletter.
You can actually get old copies too, or the current copy. It'll be published. It's published on the weekend. Goes out on Monday, and then it's put on the web as soon as my webmaster can get it on. And so you can download back on it, but you can subscribe from there as well.
Yeah.
And then there's 30 brochures. I don't think all 30 are on. I need to work on the website and make sure which ones are not on. But there are 30 brochures. The series is called The Truth About. They take an issue in global warming or same-sex marriage or transgenderism and give a biblical perspective of it. Those are kind of talking points. They're not exhaustive treatments. But the goal was originally, and still is, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. So, all right, I will help provide the knowledge. The Bible has the answer for a lot of this stuff. For instance, transgenderism. God made two genders, male and female. God does not make mistakes. So if you think you're in the wrong body, you're wrong, God's right. And it's a pretty simple path. I had
and up to the modern era,
that's the way it was.
Yes.
Nobody even thought about it.
We need to help your mind match your body.
Yeah.
Now we need to help your body match your mind. Yeah.
It was. Yeah. The best thing you can tell a child is you are what God made you to be, and you can become all that God wants you to be.
Very good. Yeah.
And that's the message that should be given to children. Not, boys are boys and girls are girls, and you can't change it. You can't do anything about it. You can change your appearance. But we're finding people that had, they were saying for a long time that unless a parent allowed a child to transgender, if they thought they were the opposite gender, they are more apt to commit suicide. We're now finding that kids that had surgeries are more apt to have commit suicide.
Yeah.
Because they're not. They think a new body. And
Satan
has done this.
It's a lie too.
Yeah, and Satan's done this in all kinds of areas. If I just had a new home, if I just had a new husband, or I just had a new wife,
then I'll fix this situation.
If I had a new, in fact, it's like when you were a kid. If you buy me this, Dad, I'll never ask you for another thing. That didn't last too long.
No, that is the truth. That is the truth. Well, hey, thanks for being on today.
Thank you for having me.
And for those listeners, you go to ariseministries.org and sign up for Tom's prayer letter. And if you're around the area, I don't think he wants to travel too far, but have Brother Stiles.
I get all over New York State. So.
All over New York State. Yeah. And he keeps busy schedule and does a great job behind the pulpit. And then if you're interested, pastorjack.org. I do a weekly blog. I let Tom handle all the hard issues. I usually just summarize a sermon.
That's not really true.
Anecdotal stuff most of the time. But if you're interested in that, and then stay tuned. Next podcast is going to be a fellow Corey Chartier, who Brother Stiles knows, and he was up at Fort Drum, and now he's ministering over in India and his military retirement, former Master Sergeant. And he'll be on next episode, so stay tuned.
Very good.
Till we see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching or listening to the Pastoral Thoughts Podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us at pastorthoughtsmail@gmail.com. Also, if you want to check out more about our ministry here, you can visit pastorjack.org. I do have a blog that I do write. I'd love to have you as one of my subscribers there. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for listening. God bless you.